6, so Chicago has long been at the center of some of the nation's most high-profile wrongful conviction cases. Now, a new book is taking a closer look at how those cases happened in the first place. This is Dr. Nicole Gonzalez Van Cleve, and she is arguing that wrongful convictions are not simply mistakes, but the result of systematic practices that can lead to convictions against innocent people. So Dr. Nicole Gonzalez, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. It's good to be home in Chicago.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's talk about your book and how you got started looking into crimes, and specifically Chicago crimes.
Yes. So I wrote a book called Crook County during the Laquan McDonald cover-up. And at the time I was embedded as a law clerk in the prosecutor's office, and I saw the kind of sloppy ways they were processing cases, judges and prosecutors admitting police were lying on cases or doctoring evidence, and I had a front row seat. So I was in the plea bargain, in the plea bargains and seeing how these cases were processed, and I just felt that something was very wrong. I mean, you heard defendants saying that's not what happened. So at the end of that book, I suggest an idea, which is, what if the numbers we understand as mass incarceration are actually mass wrongful conviction, which is that people are pleading guilty to crimes they didn't commit. But more alarmingly, the big crimes, those heater cases that Chicagoans remember and kind of stay with our consciousness, that those are rigged. And it's a frightening idea. We are the wrongful conviction capital of the nation. About 575 cases of wrongful conviction come out of Chicago. And the workhorse of those wrongful convictions are false confessions that are often doctored by police.
575, what time span is that over?
I mean, they started when
roughly.
the rise of DNA evidence started to become more pronounced.
Okay.
It's so in the late 80s they started counting. But I'm also arguing that there's so many that we don't even know about. People are waiting in a queue of hundreds right now, even in the Burge cases alone, and they're just waiting without any time. You know, it's basically just sitting there, almost like the DMV, where you're just sitting and waiting endlessly with no end in sight.
Okay. Now that, I mean, they've at least zeroed in on these notorious former cops, John Burge, Ronaldo Guevara, a book like this, is it getting easier for, because you mentioned 575 could just be the beginning, the tip of the iceberg.
It's the tip of the iceberg.
Is this kind of thing, is this going to expedite their cases, do you think?
I would hope so. I mean, so I'm an empirical researcher. I'm not an investigative reporter, but I started training as an investigative reporter because often every time you hear the word wrongful conviction, think cover-up. This is not something police want you to know about, and unfortunately, Eileen O'Neill Burke is actually tied to some of these wrongful convictions. Special Prosecutor Robert Milan is also tied to past wrongful convictions. And so when you have the kind of arbiters that could give relief to people also being tied to those past wrongful convictions, no one really wants to talk about it or look at it. And this took 6 years to research, going back and finding hidden documents, interviewing people that have been wronged, looking at false confessions and analyzing how they created these stories. We know these kids are innocent, so every time the police actually make a false confession, we can actually see how they're narrating these boys to kind of frighten the public.
Why would they do this to these folks? I mean, don't they have a conscience? What's the reason?
Right, that's a great question. The youngest defendant that was impacted was 7 years old, and he was a nonverbal child named Romar Gibson. They brought him alone in an interrogation room. He was sucking his thumb. They fed him a Happy Meal, and the detective in that case was a man named James Cassidy. And James Cassidy had a pattern. Eileen O'Neill actually supported this officer, said he was the nicest, kindest man. That's why they have him and talk to the children. You know, a statement that the police had done this before. And Cassidy is in some ways a main character here, but he represents many officers that are trained to do this interrogation, not with adults, but kids, many that are disabled. So the question is why? Why would they morally do this? Some of them are dads themselves. And I think one issue is clearance rates. In Chicago and across the nation, to dispose of investigative responsibility and say you've closed a case, all you have to do is charge somebody. That's it. They can charge any of us. And it's not a measure of accuracy. And the Chicago police right now are clearing only 50% of cases. That's literally, the idea is you could flip a coin and get away with murder. But of those cases, they could be quote unquote cleared like these wrongful conviction cases. Very sloppily done, or done through coercive practices, even for kids that are disabled.
You mentioned, okay, 7 years old, nonverbal, but what about older people who have been wrongly convicted? These false confessions, you know, it's really easy for us to sit on the sidelines and be like, how could you ever implicate yourself like that? How in the world? Paint a picture for us, based on your research, what is happening behind the scenes that could ever compel an adult to incriminate themselves in that way?
I think the main idea that everyone needs to know is that innocence does not protect you. When we think of a false confession, we always say, well, that could never happen to me. Why would I ever admit to a murder? Why would I ever admit to something as egregious as a sexual assault? We don't realize that the police are trained and have ways to make you do it, to confuse you, to isolate you, to, in some ways, put so much cohesion in the room that you feel terrified, that you forget your own, you know, the own details of whatever you've seen. Maybe you're a witness. What you see is a lot of the kids that are targeted first do have cognitive delays and disabilities. So unfortunately, when they bring in those kids, they do get confused because their cognitive age is much lower than what they look like. They often tell them we have videos, they lie to them, they trick them. The most insidious thing is they actually bring in black officers to actually tell the boys that are mostly black, listen, young man, I'm here to help you. I'm not here to hurt you, but that officer might hurt you, and but if you tell that officer, you can go free. The case that Eileen O'Neill had a hand in, they told this little boy that if he said what they wanted him to say, that he could go back to a birthday party.
No.
So what child at 12 years old wouldn't? Yes, absolutely.
Did you reach out to the now Cook County State's Attorney for a comment on that? Is she on record? What does she say in response to this allegation?
This came up during the election, and she was very adamant. I mean, the hard part is that she was supported by the Fraternal Order of Police. And most Chicagoans understand that a decent amount of accountability and oversight can be something that we all can get behind, right? So when we have officers that are, you know, conducting themselves in lawless ways, that they shouldn't be officers. They shouldn't be entrusted with enforcing the law if they're breaking the law. And they, you know, when we think about the budget, we spend about $280 million this last year on police misconduct settlements. And I do find it difficult because Eileen O'Neill will not comment on this. She's continuously supporting officers either by silence or by doing things that make it harder for wrongful convictions to get vetted. So she's basically made it very clear where she stands. And the hard part is that I think we could have a good faith discussion about this. I would love to sit across the table from her and say, this is a matter of public safety. When we have a wrongful conviction, we have an actual killer that's on the street and can reoffend. And that has happened in some of these cases where they're pinning a crime on an innocent boy and there is another murder or there's another sexual assault. And the police continue with the innocent person. Maybe because of those clearance rates, maybe because they're sloppily putting, you know, they're not in some ways rewarded for vetting other officers, right? It's a poor form or improper etiquette, but we really need to think of this as a public safety issue.
I'm curious, you know, crossing the line, you said they're breaking the law. Is there clear guidelines for these police officers when they are interrogating, and is it common practice for them to do things that are off the book?
Right. Well, I mean, there's been activists and lawyers that have tried to change some of these laws. So for instance, prior to this, we couldn't video, there wouldn't be videos of confessions. Lawyers have lobbied to have videos of confessions, or interrogations, I should say. And I think, you know, sometimes it works, but police have, like they did in the Laquan McDonald cover-up, they were doctoring videos, right? Paul O'Neill was a young man that was killed by the Chicago police, and when you hear the gunshots, the officer turns off the video. So again, I think some of these small solutions seem very reasonable to most Chicagoans, regardless of where they are on the political spectrum, but they would make a big impact. But there are cases in here where they are overtly violating laws. So Brady disclosures mean we give evidence over from the prosecutor to the defense. We have to turn over everything. We don't get to choose. Well, the police actually sometimes, or often I will say, take the evidence before it can get to prosecutors and they bury it in the precincts. Candace Gorman is a attorney that's worked on many of these cases, and she unearthed 500 cases that were impacted by these so-called street files, where officers knew the law, they knew they had to hand over the evidence to prosecutors and then of course the defense, but they were hiding the exonerating evidence that could have freed somebody.
So, and you're saying their possible motivation to bury this evidence in the precincts is clearance rates, like just to be able to meet certain quotas and look good professionally?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've all seen those press conferences where, you know, the law enforcement come and maybe a superintendent stands. So I'm so proud of my officers. For every wrongful conviction, there is a press conference that looks a lot like Spin. And so there is that, right? The saving face. We have enormous police budgets, so they need to look as though they're doing their job, right? They're crime fighters, but this really shows that they're not the crime fighters we think they are to a certain extent. The stats show that they're struggling on this. And then when we look at the wrongful convictions, it shows that it's struggling. But the other issue is that most of the people impacted by wrongful conviction are Black and Latino, poor. And one person was a young man named Daniel Taylor. He was in police custody during the time of a murder, and they still charged and convicted him despite the fact that his alibi was the police.
That's insane.
And they argued that he escaped the cell, ran 3 miles, shot a gun with like 9 other co-defendants, only to sneak back into custody. And the jury believed it because we believe the police whole cloth. And so it is, when they did interrogate a witness and have the witness kind of verify that Daniel was at the scene, of course coercing the witness, they said to the witness, no one's going to care about Daniel Taylor. He's just a foster kid. No one is going to care to see him go. And as a parent myself, that is the stuff that really hurts, right? Because you think, are these disposable children? Are they disposable people? I can't stomach that explanation, but unfortunately, the disparity in who is experiencing this, it's not exclusively Black and Latino people, but it certainly is disproportionately in a majority. And
we are apparently, according to you, the wrongful conviction capital of the entire country. Okay, the book is Crime Fictions. This has been fascinating. Dr. Nicole Gonzalez Van Cleve, thank you for joining us. If folks really want to go to the source material here, is this an Amazon deal? Is it on store shelves?
Everywhere. Support your local bookstores. It's definitely on Amazon.
Support your local bookstores. All right, thanks for being in. Appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break. More Chicago Now right after this.